in this episode of the Critical Oxygen Podcast. Any recovery tactic, or the recovery tactics that you should be using, are ones that allow you to de-stress faster, so get out of that stress state into that rest state a little bit faster, and ones that help increase the contrast of blood flow. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Critical Oxygen Podcast, where we help you optimize your physiology and maximize your athletic potential. I'm your host, Phil Batterson, and today we're joined by continuing guest host, Coach Aaron Geiser, where we're going to continue our discussion about recovery. Oh, Aaron, welcome back to the show.
How's it going? It keep bringing me back, so I guess we're doing something right.
Yeah, no, man, it's always a pleasure having you on, and I learn a lot, and I hope the viewers learn a lot too. I think I review like our podcast analytics, and one of our top trending podcasts right now is the one where we talked about like substrate oxidation. It was a long time ago, but we talked all about fat oxidation, carb oxidation, how they change during exercise intensity, different exercise intensities and stuff, and people seem to be eating that one up. So that was a good one.
I wonder if how many people want to just kind of get into the weeds and have a deeper conversation on that too. With we have different thoughts, we have different. So it's one of those funds where it just kind of goes off the path in a lot of times.
Yeah, no, I know. I think the good thing is that you and I, can have civil conversations about things we might have slightly differing opinions on, and it doesn't divulge to us being kind of like monkeys, throwing poop at each other and other things like that. So
no, it wouldn't do us much good. We're not right next to each other. So.
I know you'd have to have a pretty damn good arm to throw all the way from Kentucky to Oregon.
It would just get stuff in your own environment dirty. So there's no reason to go down that path.
I know that it's the beauty of remote podcast recording, right? Is that even if you piss off your co-host enough, like they just hang up. They're not close enough to you.
Well, and often, I mean, people probably don't know that we talk multiple times throughout the course of the week through text and other forms. We would just probably would avoid each other all week.
Yeah, no.
I'm gonna talk to you next week. It's done.
I know. Yeah, no, it's obviously, it's like I think we both have respect for each other, and that allows us to have like those mature conversations. And this isn't the whole idea of advanced recovery tactics, which I'm kind of calling this little 2-part series. It isn't that we have differing opinions. It's just you have things that work for you, I have things that work for me. And I think last time we just talked almost exclusively about sleep and nutrition. So I want to move beyond sleep and nutrition, because I think, everybody understands the importance of both of those for, setting the basis to being able to adapt to, your workouts and all of that. But there's a lot of things out there, right, that are kind of a little bit more fringe recovery, if you want to call it. And I think one of the things that I'll just, kind of start on is you generally have talked to me about your use of like a cold plunge. And I want to know, like, what's the rationale behind that? Why'd you decide to start doing the cold plunges? What have you noticed in terms of the benefits, and all of that? And then that'll, I think, get the ball rolling a bit.
Makes sense. And as far as cold water submersion, I've been a fan of it even when I was back in my playing days in college. It just, whether you were injured or you just kind of felt beat up, I would hop into a full body cold water immersion, come out, and it just felt like a reset to me. And of course, at that point, not a whole lot of research basing. It was just the way that I felt. So it opened up the door early in my life to be receptive to the style of therapy. And now I do it 7 days a week. Typically In the winter, I'm a couple of degrees colder than I am in the summer, I think just due to the dramatic shift of just my normal resting body temperature.
Mm,
For some reason, in the winter, I'm 41 degrees. Summer, I take it up to about 43 degrees. And I know that
okay.
people probably look at those 2 degrees being irrelevant, but I just feel like mentally, it's already a little bit more of a challenge to take yourself where you're probably already warm and hot because we're in a very humid and hot area. To jump in there, it's a pretty big contrast
Hmm.
to what I actually feel, that it's colder outside almost than what I'm in most days. It's colder outside than what I'm actually jumping water into or jumping into the water at. So it's not that big of a deal. But things that I've recognized is like my traditional protocol is, whether I'm in the sauna before or not, I am getting out of the cold plunge about an hour before I'm planning to go to bed.
Right.
Let the body temperature naturally warm up for about 30 minutes. And then I take a warm shower, not a hot shower, but a warm shower. And things that I find, I sleep. Like I say, I sleep like a dead person. I,
Not like a
and
baby. I think that's
right.
when people say, "Oh, I sleep like a baby," I'm just like, I've never met a baby who actually sleeps well. So,
I've never, since I don't have kids, I've just heard the stories, and I don't think that that's a very
yeah,
good use of like an analogy, so I don't
yeah,
use it. So I, 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 I do feel like I wake up more rested. I wake up more focused on the tasks for the next day,
hmm,
and I'm able to complete more of those tasks. There is a little bit to say about when, not every day, since I do it every single day, not every day do you look at that water and say, boy, I feel like jumping in some 41-degree weather or
yeah,
40-degree water. So it takes a little bit of mental toughness to do
hmm,
that. Sometimes if I've been traveling for work or at an event and I come back to it, the first couple of days are a little bit hard to get into the water because you haven't had to do it. And so I do feel like there is some makeup there that just makes me more mentally tough.
hmm.
And looking at that decision of, I got to get this thing done, the only way that I'm going to do is submerge my body and just get it over with and get in and do it. Um, I feel more relaxed.
Hmm.
It also gives me an opportunity when I am in the water, once I've made that regulation to the water and the feeling in my body, I'm able to then just kind of focus on breathing. I don't have it, it's in my garage, so it's quiet. I don't have any distractions, so I'm able to just kind of get in, and it's almost like a meditative stretch of time because I'm
Hmm.
not doing anything else, focusing on my breath. If you're focusing on the cold of the water, sometimes you'll end up like jackhammering and you can't stop shaking. But if you let that guard down and just focus on the moment, there's kind of that moment of clarity and just relaxation for me. I, and like I said, I sleep really, really well.
Hmm.
So it's just been a very, very positive outcome for me. And
So how long are you typically in the cold plunge for?
my standard is 5 minutes.
Okay.
It's due to that degree. There's research that shows that you can be in long, but five is that mean that that I see and research the most. So I stick with five.
Yeah.
It's anything more. I feel like let me say, that time would change based on how you're utilizing it. I maybe would go a little bit longer if it was to start my day because I am
Mm.
trying to get more kind of energized. And it is pretty healthy for the mitochondria. So if you stay in there a little bit longer, you will see energetic boost in that case. But since I am trying to settle down at night, I don't want to stay in there too long.
Right.
And it so it would adjust based on what time of the day and how your protocol is using. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I'd also like to add, for those of you who are interested, don't just go jumping into a 41 or a 43 degree cold plunge right off the bat. It does take time to actually build your body up to the stress of the cold. And it's just like with anything. Like you wouldn't start out, well, most of us wouldn't start out doing like triathlon training with 40 hours a week of training, right? You have to build up to it. You have to build that stress in. And with cold plunges, it's the duration and it's the temperature. So start with something that's like relatively manageable. Maybe that's 55 degrees, 50 degrees, something like that. But something that is slightly uncomfortable, but something you can manage, and then you can always make it colder. And you run less of a risk again of inducing too much stress for that situation. Because so for example, I used to do cold plunge, but it would be hot cold contrast. So I'd go into the cold plunge, and then I'd go into like a steam room, and I'd go back and forth. And this was before I had any idea of like kind of this introduction of time and intensity and other things like that. And I would generally get through one or two of those sets where it'd be like, okay, go to the sauna for 5 minutes, go to the cold plunge for, I don't know, sometimes it would only be like 2 minutes, sometimes it'd be 4 minutes depending on the day. And I'd get through one or two sets and I'd be like, oh my gosh, like I'm actually feel exhausted almost, as opposed to invigorated. So that's kind of, I think, what you should be looking for, is that sense of, okay, like I feel good. I feel like I've had that meditative effect like Aaron was talking about. And another reason why hot cold contrast can be beneficial is because it actually, it causes your body to vasoconstrict and vasodilate very, very rapidly. So you actually, regardless of if you're doing exercise, which is another really good way of moving blood around the body, it does that without you having to go and do like a hard workout for extended periods of time. You can get in the cold, vasoconstrict, get out, go to the warm shower, vasodilate, and you get this flux of blood and nutrients all around the body. So that's probably one of the reasons why it is beneficial. You also have to remember that by vasodilating and then vasoconstricting, you're moving metabolites in and out of tissues themselves. So it's just it's a circulation sort of thing. You're stimulating your circulation, and potentially could be reducing any sort of buildup of metabolites that might be remaining from hard workouts consistently.
And individuals that have any type of blood pressure instabilities or too high, too low, you want to avoid this, or at least have the discussion with your doctor before you do that. Mm-hmm. Just because there are some precautions that you would need to take in that case, and we would 100% not want anybody that maybe is in one of those conditions to go and test this out, because there is some contraindications for you mm-hmm. in that health state. So being able to kind of pay attention to that. And it's, again, that there's just research found on the norepinephrine I shouldn't say development, but release, and just the neurotransmission of neurons and things like that as well from the cold therapy that is beneficial.
Yeah, it's like any stress, right? Your body gets better at actually controlling it and adapting to it. So, maybe you have less of a stress response, and, in turn, if you have less of a stress response, you have a lower hormone release, and then that's going to, potentially be beneficial going down the road. I will say, though, that for individuals who are just kind of, training, hour, like maybe an hour a day. Um, cold cold plunge therapy may not really move the needle too much in terms of, unless you're really beating yourself up. Where I would say, and in fact, it might actually blunt some of the adaptations to exercise, because what you're doing is you're essentially quelling any sort of like inflammation or signaling that's going on within the body. So it has been shown that if you do, immediately post exercise, get into a cold plunge, just like if you took large doses of vitamin C and vitamin E antioxidants, you can actually blunt the exercise response to some of the, blunt the exercise response by going in the cold plunge. But for people like Aaron, how many hours a week are you training at this point?
A little bit lower, 17.
A little bit lower, 17. So guys like Aaron who are training, maybe 16 to 24 hours, maybe even more than that per week, having that cold plunge on a daily basis is actually, is most likely going to be beneficial, because he's doing so much work and building up so much stress in his body that he actually needs to accelerate that recovery a little bit more. So keep that in mind. It's the same thing with like heat therapy. Like if you get into a sauna or a hot bath, or something like that, it's going to kind of do something similar. Except obviously this time you're not going into cold, you're going into heat. So you'll stimulate pathways that are responsible for both of those. But again, it's really the recovery response is going to be beneficial for those that are actually, doing a lot of exercise per week, because it's going to help you recover a little bit faster, move those nutrients around, other things like that. And so we can switch over to heat therapy a little bit, because something that I like to do is I like to do like a warm bath with Epsom salts and other things like that, just as like, relaxation, get a little bit of magnesium, other things like that. And then I can go in and get a nice, stretch before I go to bed. And one of the things that I will say is that if you do supplement heat therapy, like going into a hot shower, into a sauna, into a hot bath, immediately following your exercise, you might be able to actually extend your heat load, which could then extend your adaptations to heat, which would be increases in plasma volume. If you maintain those increases in plasma volume for extended periods of time, you might be able to increase hemoglobin content, other things like that. And you might be able to become more heat acclimated without having to do more exercise in the heat. That's kind of speculation in terms of just things that I've observed from reading various research articles and things like that. But I think that's one way that I use heat, and one way that you could potentially use heat to stimulate some heat responses if you're actually looking into racing in Kona or doing something along those lines.
I didn't know we were going to talk about heat acclimation. We have a whole course on that. I can go deep into the walls of that one. But I
Yeah.
as far as the episode, again, should say some of the practices that we have already talked about and that we are going to talk about don't they lack the consistency in research across the board to all individuals. So
Mm-hmm.
one thing I often recommend to athletes is, if it's not going to hurt you, it's it if you, and you think that it benefits you, continue to do it. And as long as it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
hurt you, it's important to keep that in the front of your mind, because I could go into research that the Epsom salt, it makes your skin softer, and there is some absorption to magnesium, but there is just as many things on the opposite side of it that it doesn't do anything. But if it helps you stretch, if it helps you
Mm-hmm.
relax, if it helps you do other things, by all means, do it. Keep it going. So
Right.
when we say these, we do recognize that there could be an argument on the other side that that person's wasting their time, or well, it could be waste of time for
Hmm.
one particular individual, but maybe not for another individual. So recognize when we
Right.
are discussing these, we recognize that we, I guess we should say, Phil, on the first episode, we focused on really what is the more consistent movers in recovery. And
Yeah.
these things are, as he talked about earlier in the introduction, more fringe style things. And that fringe means that
Hmm.
they might work for Phil, they might work for me, but they don't work for you, vice versa. So
Hmm.
again, when it comes to my recommendation to athletes is, if it's not going to hurt you and you feel that it has benefit, most likely I'm not going to spend the time telling you why it's not going to benefit you, because that's not getting me any benefit and that's not getting you any benefit. Keep doing what you're doing, unless I just look at it and say, man, you're wasting 5 hours a week at this thing and you're not getting anything in return, and you're not hitting your workouts on the other side of it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that is a perfect caveat because yeah, I mean, there's stuff that exactly what I said with the cold literature, right? Is like there's some stuff that says, oh, it blunts your ability to actually like get better. But at the end of the day, if it's one of those things where, from a mental perspective, like, the bath is just a way of me being able to like decompress and watch, whatever Amazon show I'm watching at the time, or, do other things like that and kind of get my mind off of, like the stress of the day. So again, that's kind of goes back to our first episode where it's like, okay, well, what's a good routine to start to get your mindset away from the stress so you can get into deeper sleep faster. So that's really helped me. I'm trying to think of other things that have, that are really kind of like my go-to. I mean, I foam roll every night. We all know, like, if I started talking about like, oh, foam rolling is going to break up adhesions and other things like that, that's kind of largely debunked. But at the same time, it's just another way of me having, some mobility routine that is going to allow me to get into that more kind of relaxed state faster. Um, Something I do use fairly regularly is I worked with a guy who is like a development engineer, researcher over at Therabody. And he sent me one of those like mini, little TheraGun things. So like, whenever I have like aches and pains, I just put it there, for a little bit, and it's kind of, another, a way of doing self massage. And I've found that the self massage is useful, but I would prefer, and I think you do this quite a bit, or maybe once a month, is you go to a massage therapist and you get like a deep tissue massage. So do you want to talk about deep tissue, or just massage in general, and it's what you think like the benefits are?
I see my massage therapist once a week. I feel like it is one of the more valuable things that I do from a recovery aspect. From one, I've seen TJ now for probably 5 years, 4 years, and he has a good recognition of when I'm walking even in the door. He can see, well, you're a little bit out of alignment here, or you're a little bit out of alignment there, or you're tight here. So there is that relationship that's been built up
Mm-hmm.
there where, one, he can recognize it in my gait. Two, he can recognize it when he gets into the massage itself. So the other thing is, we are just trying to get positive blood flow through the body and allow for more oxygenated blood to come into
Mm-hmm.
limbs and areas. So therefore, that oxygenated blood can start or help and assist with recovery. So we are trying to get, very similarly as you talked about, the
Mm-hmm.
vasoconstriction and vasodilation. We're in that case, what you're trying to do is get positive blood flow by expanding and decreasing the size of your arteries and veins back through the body. This is just another way to get that positive blood flow through the body and start to push lymph, like swelling, back into the lymph system and get it worked through the heart to then allow it to be properly managed. The additional piece is one can say I treat my body like an amusement park, and that amusement park needs a little bit of maintenance on a regular basis. So if muscles get tight that we don't necessarily maybe feel within our run or our bike or our swim, they still do have that tension. And sometimes those can end up getting so bad that they are a limitation, whether it be on your reach in the swim or whether it be your kick on the run. These things can really, really start to hamper your performance as well. And I feel with me seeing my massage therapist on a regular basis, one, they can tell me what they're recognizing and saying, you know what, your tensor fascia latte is a little bit tight. So over the next week or two, really pay a little bit more attention in stretching, rolling. That's going to help your performance within that workout. They're also getting into it in that session, but then also giving me some homework to do to maintain and keep my body providing me that amusement park experience every time I go and want to ride. So I feel like that is just an important dose for me, because it's easy when you have an ailment or when something's tight and you recognize it, you can get in and do it. But there are times when there are these trigger points that are starting to form within your body. And sometimes when they actually creep up, it's too late. And then we need to either get to the PT, get some form of therapy to get that released. I'd much rather be proactive in that case.
Yeah, 100% agree. I've been having my lower back's actually been pretty tight this entire week, and I've been trying to figure out what it was. Like I did some work in the garage, like been reorganizing it and stuff, and then I have a hex bar, and I only did like, it's like 135 pounds, and I lifted it like 5 times, something like that. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not what's causing my back to be tight. But I woke up on Monday and it was, sure enough, it was kind of tight. And, then did a little bit of a threshold workout on Monday, did a VO2 max workout on Tuesday, did a hard, kind of run on Wednesday. And I noticed that when I was like, going up the hill, I could actually feel it quite a bit. And something that kind of dawned on me today, because I was on the bike and I was trying to play, what the heck is going on or wrong with my back. And I was like, I wonder if it's because it feels like it's like, I wonder if it's because my hip flexors are getting kind of tight. So, I'm hunched over quite a bit. I've been doing a lot more intensity. And I was like, I wonder if it's the hip flexors, pulling, and being a little tight. But, I'm not a movement specialist. I'm not a, PT. I'm not a chiropractor or anything like that. So I don't really know. But what I've been trying to do is now I'm trying to stretch them. And it would be nice if I did have a massage therapist that I go to, say, every Friday or something like that, to give me some indication. Oh, your lower back is kind of tight, and your hip flexors are also pretty tight. So, focus on those for the next week or so, see if that makes it any better, and then, go from there. But yeah, so that's
I think your saddle height is too high.
You think it's too high? Because I feel like it.
That'd be the first thing that I would look.
Well,
just because if that is the case, you could be overextending your leg slightly, which is forcing hamstring extension and engagement in a very extended position. And often those hamstrings are originating on the lower spine. Not that I'm trying to diagnose you, but this is just where I would start.
Okay. No, that's good.
You're probably more extending the hamstrings that originate on the lower lumbar part of the spine, and that could be causing some of that tension. But if I was close to you, that would be one of the tests.
Yeah.
Biomechanical tests that I would be going through first.
No, that's great. That's also one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up, to see if you had any input on it. I also think I've always had a tendency, because I have like, a torn labrum in my right hip. I have a tendency to kind of tuck my butt a little bit more. And I think overall it just kind of makes my hamstrings a little bit tighter because it's trying to keep my hip in a proper position where it's not rotating too much. So I always have pretty tight hamstrings. So I think I need to strengthen my hamstrings and stretch them, at the same time, just to make sure that that is not becoming a continuous issue. It's so interesting how having one injury like that can kind of throw everything off.
Agreed. And knowing the kind of work that you've also been doing on the bike and where you were feeling it on the run, I mean, just makes me think they're currently being overstimulated,
Hmm.
and it just might be from a positional standpoint.
Yeah, I'll try to lower my seat just a little bit. I remember we talked about crank length as well. And that is something that I have kind of played with the idea, because if I shorten the crank length a little bit, then maybe the seat could come up just slightly, and that might not be putting as much stress on the hamstrings for not extending quite as much. But I digress. That's not a recovery tactic. That's a
Yeah, we
that's
did.
a Aaron, help me.
Yeah, we definitely got a little bit off, but also, as you talked about, TheraGun, Hypervolt, those are the two predominant brands that make those kind of, I call them hammers, but massage guns.
Hmm.
Again, point in cases to stimulate blood flow, release tension. Um, I am a big fan of trigger point balls. I know some individuals
Mm.
use
Like
lacrosse
the like
balls,
the the super heavy, yeah, heavy rubber balls.
but what they, especially with as much as I'm on the bike, my glutes can get pretty tight. So
Mm.
I'll just kind of find a spot and just sit in it and allow it to just melt a little bit. Kind of it's similar to foam rolling, but in this case, I do feel it's a true trigger point. That, like, the glute muscles aren't very large muscles. They're in length, I should say. They are big muscles for the body, but they are not long. So you can get these little points that are knots or trigger points, and you can just find that
Hmm.
ball into that right spot, sit in it, let it melt. Um, Therabody also, I think, released some suction cupping units.
Oh, yep.
Um, the research, if you'd really look at how cupping is done in the therapeutic sense, it's a pretty barbaric procedure. It's not just the let's suck off all the air in the cup and then maybe move the cup around or leave the cup in one spot. It actually is a pretty barbaric thing. But what happens is, if you at least use that suction area, the thought process is you almost get that little um, hickey on the skin because it's just pulling blood and blood vessels into that area again, just to get positive blood flow. Um,
Hmm.
just overall stretching, yoga, meditation are other things that can be utilized. I find it's it's important to find what your niche is, and not, some people really like yoga because it's a movement principle. Some people can
Hmm.
handle the meditation. Sometimes it's combining the breathing technique with the movement that is the most important. So don't feel like you have to do one or the other. Maybe you do both, but if you want, you can always try one or the other. It's really just trying to, I mean, in that case, often it's just breathing techniques that are being utilized. And in that case, you're releasing hormones positive throughout the body to allow for recovery. And I mean, that's kind of what our topic is today. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what we're going for.
If you haven't noticed, the overarching story of today is, okay, how do you increase blood flow to the areas that need increase blood flow the most, or how do you put yourself in a state of relaxation even faster? And it doesn't matter if you're using, like the TheraGun, the needle mats that I use when I sleep, the cupping procedures, whatever it is, it's whatever works for you to get you in a relaxed state and to get that blood flow, more quickly. That's, I think, kind of going to accelerate that recovery a little bit better. What do you think about TENS units, like the little e-stim machines that, like, places like Therabody and other things like that use?
So when I went through my sports medicine degree, this was just common practice. It
Mm-hmm.
was something that the research was all just great at that time. And current day, it has its place. It's just not as effective as we probably originally thought.
Yeah.
And where it has its most effect is that it is sending these little small electrical shocks into the muscle to allow them to create a contraction.
Mm-hmm.
The contraction, release. And for individuals, one, that have trouble contracting muscles, it's a good use because it can contract a muscle for you. Because there are individuals out there where you say, extend your leg out to contract your quadricep muscle. You could actually put these electrodes on the particular muscle that you want to and stimulate that muscle to get the contraction if that individual either can't do it or does not have the necessary neurologic nerve reaction to do so. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that contraction release does create tense, relax, tense, relax. And what traditionally can happen from that tense relax is just a state of relaxation in the muscle as well, is another thing. So if you're trying to create a contraction, one, if you're trying to create just a little bit more relaxation in the muscle, is another way to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it, it the There are minimal blood flow benefits, but there has been proven a number of other modalities currently that are being used within the recovery scene that do a little bit more productive job of creating more effective blood flow
Mm-hmm.
and oxygenation through the blood flow. So from that, it's better than nothing, but it's not going to be a huge return. Well, the first thing I call voodoo magic, but the dry needling is the savior
Mm.
for it. It has a more, it's more intrusive, but it has a more functional return on investment, because what you're actually doing is you're sending a needle into the muscle belly, into a trigger point, and you're causing a forced muscle contraction and release. Often in that trigger point, you're getting some cross fibering of the muscle, which is it's a weakened state of the muscle, which can create more injury down the road. Two, it just it's an unhealthy form for the muscle. So often when you have that contraction and release, you start to have those muscle fibers start to come back into a line where they are the strongest and where they are the most relaxed. So
Mm-hmm.
dry needling is one of my, for like, if somebody says, hey, I have calf issues, that's one of the first things that I point out. I forget the second state, but California has to actually see doctors. So I do apologize for those individuals. It should be something that is readily available as it is across the country, but it is the first sign of defense for me when I have an athlete say, hey, I got muscle, like I got this niggle in my calf, or I got my niggle in
Mm-hmm.
my hamstring. Let's get your physical therapist on the phone and get you in for some dry needling. That's the first thing. But as far as the hopefully that's what you were talking about. If not, I'm not 100% sure.
No, Yeah, no, we were talking about, so back a little while ago,
Oh,
you
shockwave,
know,
shockwave
I
therapy.
yeah, oh, not
Yeah,
yeah. So okay, so concussion therapy is probably a lot different because, that
that's
like
yeah.
shockwave therapy. Yeah, so nomenclature incorrect, but yes, shockwave therapy was one of them that you talked about, and then yeah, we can talk about the regenerative medicine sort of side of things too, just as like a very, very niche out there sort of recovery tactic. But yeah, so the shockwave therapy, have you used it before, and what have you seen from it? In terms of like benefits or
100% I've
none?
used 100% I've used it. It's very, very similar to the units that we talked about from Therabody and HyperIce with their Hypervolt and the TheraGun.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest difference is that it's much more. It's it's got a titanium head, so its contact with the muscle or tendon in that case is much more dense and it's much more effective
Mm.
because there's so much that those guns can do in a non-therapeutic, like I guess in a clinical aspect, I should say, that they have to be able to only go up to a certain range.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is something that a medical professional does have to be involved in, but with that titanium head, it is going in at a much more percussive effect, speed, depth, and due to the titanium head, it's much more abrasive in that case.
Mm-hmm.
But from what the research that we have is, and from when I've either used it on athletes or had it been used on athletes, recovery time has shown to be much, much greater and expedited in that case. Because what it does is, from the percussive aspect of it, it's so aggressive. What it's doing is it's creating a inflammation response.
Mm-hmm.
In this, you do not want to take any type of NSAIDs to decrease the inflammation response within the body. But what it does is creates that inflammation response within that targeted area that you use the tool on, and then the body goes about its normal natural progression through recovery,
Mm-hmm.
sending more resources to that area, getting things taken care of, and then allowing the body to recover from that sense. So Hypervolt is another one that I often I do recommend the Hypervolt if to my California athletes, because they can't get the dry needling in
Right.
most cases. They can get the Hypervolt in a much easier setting. I know chiropractors have them, physical therapists have them, so they are a tool that can be utilized to help overcome some injuries and expedite the process of getting over an
Mm-hmm.
injury for sure.
Yeah, that that's actually a perfect kind of step towards a little bit more of like the idea of quote unquote regenerative medicine that, we had talked about, very briefly. So I have a torn labrum in my hip, and the kind of the two solutions, at least, that most doctors recommend are physical therapy to see if it actually gets better, or like operable, surgery where they go in, replace the labrum, clean out the bone, do other things like that that'll make it so, you don't have to deal with the torn cartilage in your hip anymore. So I was like, well, I'm 30 years old. I don't really want to do a major hip surgery that could increase my risk for, arthritis and other things like that. So I was looking around, and I found this chiropractor, physical therapy, regenerative medicine clinic in my town. And I went and I talked to them, and they started to talk to me about a couple of different things. So all of this stuff, this is like super fringe recovery stuff that, talk to your doctor before trying to implement any of this sort of stuff. And from a clinical standpoint, a lot of this stuff doesn't really have too much clinical backing at this point. So also take that with a grain of salt. But one of the big things is PRP, plasma enriched, or what is it? I can't even speak today, but it's plasma enriched like replacement therapy or something like that. Platelet rich plasma. There it is. We're getting there. We're getting there. Platelet rich plasma. And what you do is you take your blood, or they draw your blood, spin it down, take all the platelets out of it, and then they put those platelets into the affected area. What this is supposed to do is kind of similar to that it's not concussive therapy, but I want to call it that now, shockwave therapy. And it creates a local inflammation response. That local inflammation response then recruits, all the repair cells that are in your body, and then the idea is that it's going to actually cause regeneration of whatever tissue it is that's being damaged. You can do this with plasma rich or platelet rich plasma, or you can just do it with saline solution.
I've never needed it, but I've gone down the path of having the conversation. It does have, you might recall probably back in maybe like 2012, I want to say, Kobe Bryant went to Europe to have a procedure done in the off season. And everybody's like, well, why the heck's he going over to Europe to get this done? Because it wasn't, I don't think it was available within the States at that time, but this is the procedure that he had, was PRP.
Mm-hmm.
And the platelet-rich plasma really, it's like you said, it draws blood out, puts it in a centrifuge, and then that separates the plasma or the platelet, and then that is then inserted into the area. It has very, very high. And were you talking about an epidural?
No, epidural is like the.
Because you said.
Sorry. It's not epidural. I'm trying to look it up right now, and I'm not having any positive outcomes.
There are some beneficial research utilized for PRP. Sometimes there are points where you're too far past a point where it's going to be effective. Mm-hmm. So there is a timeline of when you will get a benefit or not benefit. And again, since we are talking about the fringes, what the research does show is that this is not something that every single person is going to receive a benefit from. Just like there is these gel shots that you can put into the knee that's called Synvex 1 that individuals have gotten. It has really helped individuals. Other individuals didn't even have an hour of benefit from it. So there's just, when you get into this style, often the U.S. insurance company looks at it as exploratory. So you're often out the money. And the other side of that is you might not get any benefit from it at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's exactly what you told me, when I was like, oh, should I do, PRP injections, or the next, like the further step in that is mesenchymal stem cell injections, which are, they're not derived from, stem cells as we once thought anymore. They're derived from like the umbilical cords of born babies. Which is even weirder, but it's still it's a high amount of stem cells that have the ability to adapt and kind of aid in recovery if you truly still have a signal there. And it's one of those things where it's kind of 50-50 in terms of if it's going to work or not. Because it's not covered by insurance, it's generally pretty expensive. I know like a stem cell injection was going to be like $4,000. For me, which is like, that's an insane amount of money. PRP was like, $200 or $300, which, I was like, okay, well, if it has the ability to potentially fix my hip, or at least make my hip feel better for longer, then I'll take that, chance. But again, all of these things that we're talking about, all of these injections, these are for more of like the, acute injuries that you would potentially get, whether it's something with your knee, something with your ankle, or like a chronic arthritis sort of situation, those sort of things. This isn't like, oh, this isn't just like a recovery tactic for you to recover from, you know, like that one VO2 max workout where you went a little bit too hard. This is like how to recover from, you know, an injury. Um, so there,
I,
yeah, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say this kind of makes me. I want to. You just talked about something that hit a hot nerve of mine, where I have heard athletes that utilize IVs for recovery, and
Mm,
to give everybody that watches this or hears this the knowledge, if you compete under a WADA sport or a USADA sport, so that means triathlon of any form, high levels of running, and USA track and field, IVs are illegal. You can't use them. And
mm-hmm,
whether you're going to one of those like hot bars that just plug you up and send you, and you think you're only getting vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, that's still illegal. So IVs of any type are illegal. Now, we've all heard stories where an athlete had to get an IV after a race because it was emergency needed. Now, there is a
mm-hmm,
therapeutic utilization exemption that they have to go through post. But if you're going to do anything of that sort, you would need to put in for the therapy. If you're going to use it for a recovery, you would need to put it in before, and you would need to get that approved. And it's not going to get approved. But
mm-hmm.
I, I'm sorry I'm going down this path because this is just a hot topic. But
It's okay.
utilizing any form of IV, especially for recovery, for the what we do and what I coach in, it is illegal. And I can't say that as stern
Mm-hmm,
enough. It is illegal. And there are therapeutic utilization exemptions that can take place, but you need to go through them for it to be legal. So if you're in a
mm-hmm.
medically emergency situation, they might use that, but you still will go through a post TUI scenario where on the front half, if you're going to do something like that, you'd need to do it on the front half before you ever do it. Get approved before you're actually doing something legal. But if you don't go through that process or you don't get approved, you are doping. Sorry. I
Mm-hmm.
just, I had,
No, no, no. I think I thought you were going to go down the rabbit hole of being like, we are not, you know, physicians. So consult with your physician before doing any of this. So that's what I would say. But also, yes, know the rules of your sport and don't do anything outside the rules. If any of these things, like, you know, for example, if getting a PRP injection is outside of the realm of legality, which I don't know if it actually is or not, but for sure the IVs are. So before you go and do any of that sort of stuff, you have to know because you gotta if you're going to compete, you have to play the game of doing things above board, making it, you know, fair and equal competition for everybody. So I 100% echo that sentiment, and I do think that we're talking about, you know, things that are a little bit more fringe. I think like the IV stuff, I hope is pretty fringe for most people, but there are, you know, those IV bars out there that like if you went in there, you know, if you were just somebody who is just, you know, training for like health and wellness or whatever it was and you're not competing, by all means that's a way of doing, you know, of recovering. But if you are going to compete in any USADA, WADA sanctioned events, and I'm sure, you know, pretty much every other, you know, sanctioned event out there has some level of anti-doping rules. Know what you're getting into. Don't be the type of person that's like, oh well, you know, like don't plead ignorance. That's like the thing that bugs me the most, especially when, you know, an athlete is like, oh well, you know, I didn't know that, you know, my protein was spiked with whatever. There's companies that are out there that make supplements that are, I think it's a USF certified, Unite or something like that, where it's a level of regulation that ensures that what you are taking is actually what you're taking, as opposed to, you know, like other potential supplement companies where they're like making, like your pre-workouts or like other things like that there where there might be sprinkling in a little bit more, so you get a little bit more, juice for your buck, and literally, juice as in doping stuff. So don't be the type of person that gets caught doing that sort of thing. And don't plead ignorance if that is the case, because you are on that road of doping, even though you might not think it's the same as like taking EPO or doing something like that. No, you're still cheating.
And those organizations are NSF.
Yeah.
And those organizations are NSF certified and safe sport.
Okay, yeah, and it's
or informed sport. Sorry, informed
sport and NSF, and it's really easy most of the time to find supplements that are. They might be a little bit more expensive, but it is because they have to go through that secondary regulation process. I would say, for the most part, though, if you stick to a lot of the things that we talked about in the beginning of this episode, right? Like the hyper ice, the TheraGuns, the trigger point rolling, the massage therapy, other things like that. That's going to be generally on the side of okay. It again, and this is what I want to continue to reiterate, is any recovery tactic or the recovery tactics that you should be using are ones that allow you to de-stress faster, so get out of that stress state into that rest state a little bit faster, and ones that help increase the contrast of blood flow, so vasoconstriction and vasodilation, in order to allow you to pump more oxygenated blood to the tissue and then take away metabolites that are being produced by the tissue that could be then, hindering your ability to perform. Those are the things that we're trying to do with these recovery tactics. We'll leave you guys with that after the stern talking to by Coach Aaron. I think that's the big takeaway is, don't do anything stupid. Don't do anything that's going to get you into trouble, because we do the sport so we can compete and perform our best. And it's really disappointing when somebody does something, shady that, gives them an advantage outside of what is deemed an acceptable advantage in terms of, an acceptable fair advantage. That's what I'll say. If you guys have any questions, or if you have what's your favorite recovery modality, comment down below, or shoot us a DM if you guys have anything that we didn't touch on. You can find me at Critical02 on Instagram. You can find Aaron at Try A Geiser. And if you're, again, I'll plug Aaron's ride for you. On Saturday mornings, he's always doing 8 a.m. Eastern time, a Zwift ride. It's his long ride with Endure IQ. So go ahead, jump on there, ask him some questions. He says that he's always answering questions and stuff, and it helps him get through the ride a little bit better too. So you're helping him out, and he's helping you out. It's a win-win for everybody. And with that, we're recording this a couple days before Christmas, so happy holidays to everybody, Merry Christmas, all that sort of stuff, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.